Prior to moving to Nebraska, Mr. Foley spent 20 years in Washington, D.C., where he was the Director of Financial Analysts for the National Association of Regulatory Utility Commissioners. He served 6 years in the Nebraska legislature, where he helped us citizens and he fought against wasteful spending of tax dollars. In 2007, was elected as the Nebraska Auditor of Public Accounts, re-elected in 2010 with over 80% of the vote. Pretty cool. His work as auditor resulted in the exposure of many millions of dollars of waste, fraud, and inefficiency in government operations. In 2014, was elected to the office as the running mate of Governor Pete Ricketts and was re-elected in 2018. In 2022, he was elected once again as the Nebraska Auditor of Public Accounts. Lieutenant Governor Mike Foley is a dedicated public servant who's led the efforts to protect Nebraska taxpayers. We welcome Mike Foley to the podium. Thanks for being here, Mike.
We'll see how it goes. Thanks very much. What a great pleasure to be with you today. It's a gorgeous day out there, and it's just a pleasure to be invited to speak to the River City Republicans. A special shout out to my good friend, Senator Jim Jensen, and wife Joan. Good to see you guys again. Jim was a long-time friend. I came into the legislature in 2001, and Jim was already there. I'd been there for a number of years, and he was very gracious to me in helping me to navigate into the process and learn the ropes. I think our voting records look pretty darn similar. We were right there on key issues. So, what's going on? On Wednesday, January 4th, the next legislature will be sworn in. And they say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, I'm going to pass around 2 pictures. They're out of date, so they're not worth 1,000 words, but they're worth 500 at least. And it gives you a snapshot of the power center of the legislature. The state's population for 100 years has been moving from west to east, to the point now where 56% of our population, more than half, is in 3 counties: Douglas, Sarpy, Lancaster. And of course, every 10 years we redraw those lines in legislature, and the seats in Lincoln and Omaha get smaller, more compact, more dense, and out west we're traveling hundreds of miles to find enough people to make up a legislative district. So this kind of puts it into perspective. You look at, these are all the senators that represent Lincoln and Omaha. Those are all the senators that represent the rest of the state. So now the picture's a little stale. This is actually this past legislature, it's not a new one. But it gives you a flavor for the number of seats that are represented in the 2 sectors of our state. And it's not necessarily a good thing for our state to have so few senators representing the central and western part of our state, because Nebraska, after all, is an agricultural state. That's what really pays the bills in our state, is the ag sector. We are number 1 in production of red meat cattle. Our steaks are terrific, and the world loves them and buys them by the billions of dollars. Big industry, big business. We're number 2 in ethanol production, number 3 in corn production. We have 9 million acres of irrigated farm ground. Nobody else has that. We did. 9 million acres. And we've got this thing, for lack of a better word, called the Ogallala Aquifer, a veritable ocean of clean water beneath the surface of vast regions of our state. Every other state in the Union would give their right arm and their left arm to have that aquifer. And they might have pieces of it. We've got it. We've got that aquifer. It's critically important. So we are poised to be an agricultural powerhouse for as many years down the road as you can see. The governor just got back from Japan yesterday. I just got back from Taiwan a week or so ago. He and I, this time of year, do trade missions, and it's just fascinating to travel the world and see how the rest of the world is enjoying the agricultural products of Nebraska. They love our beef, pork, corn, wheat, eggs, you name it, they will buy it. And it's not good for Nebraska to have so few senators representing this core industry. But it is what it is. You've got one man, one vote, and if people want to live here in the East, because it doesn't take as many people these days to run a farm or a ranch. The kids who come off those farms and ranches, they come to Lincoln or Omaha, they go to school, they kind of like it, and they stay. And we're happy to have them here. But anyway, it has a big influence on the politics of our state. I'm going to spend probably more than half of my time just talking about the legislature, even though the job that I'm going into is state auditor. Because I've been in the legislature for 6 years as a voting member. Then the past 8 years, I've been the presiding officer of the legislature as one of the roles of the lieutenant governor. So on January 4th, coming up, there'll be a lot of pomp and ceremony. The senators will be there on the floor. Many of them will have their wives and kids with them on the floor for the ceremonial introduction. The color guard will come in, and it's going to be all beautiful. The new senators will step forward. They'll raise their right hand before the Chief Justice of Nebraska State Supreme Court, and they will swear to uphold the Constitution of the state of Nebraska. Well, what does that Constitution say? Well, I've got a copy of it right here. And it happens to say that all votes of the legislature, not just some votes, not most of the votes, all votes shall be, the use of Latin here, viva voce, meaning a public vote. All votes. That makes good on the promise of George Norris, who in the 1930s invented, if you will, the unicameral legislature. And he barnstormed the state, and he got the folks in Nebraska to sign this petition to put the unicameral concept on the ballot. What did George Norris promise? And those who signed it said the request of any member of the legislature is sufficient to secure a roll call vote on any question. Not just bills, not just constitutional amendments, but on any question. That was George Norris's promise, made good in our state constitution. So these men and women step forward, they raise their right hand, they swear to uphold that Constitution, and then what do? The very first thing they do is elect leadership according to the rules of the legislature. What do the rules of the legislature say? Just happen to have a copy of that, too. Rule 1, page 1, the very first rule says, at the commencement of each regular session, the legislature shall nominate from the floor and elect by secret ballot the following officers. How do they get away with that? That's not right. That's not right. Now, you can argue the policy all day long, that you think that the senators ought to have a secret ballot. You can argue that all day long. But that's not what George Norris promised. That's not what the state constitution says. This rule book is wrong. And what happens is, in any given legislature, you're probably going to have about 30 to 33, somewhere in there, Republicans. This next one going in, it's going to be 32 Republicans, 17 Democrats. I guarantee you, those 17 Democrats are going to vote as a rock-solid block. You can't break that. They're going to vote as a block. And what they'll do is they'll reach across and they'll find some, call them, well, I don't use that term, but I hear you. Let's call them moderates, be kind to them. And they'll build a coalition. And they'll govern from the center left. That's not right. That's not what Nebraska is. Nebraska is a red state. We're a conservative Republican state. But all too often, the key committee leadership positions don't land in the hands of the Republican Party. You'd think with 32 votes, it only takes 25 to elect a speaker or a committee chairman. 25 votes, all it takes. We got 32. Why don't we take every single leadership position? We don't. And we won't in this next legislature either. So there may be a move on day one to change that rule. There may be, I don't know. Senators are talking about it. We're drawing more and more attention to this problem. People, and again, there may be policy reasons why you want to let people have a secret vote, but that wasn't the promise. And you got to live up to the promise. If you're going to raise your right hand, you got to live up to that promise. So that's a big problem. The other issue that's troubling is this rule of 33. If it's a controversial bill, the rules say 25 votes, the bill passes. Got to do it 3 times, 3 rounds of voting. But if it's controversial and somebody files a lot of amendments against your bill and filibusters your bill, then it's not 25 anymore. It's 33. It takes 33 votes to invoke cloture. Well, if it takes 33 votes to invoke cloture, you've only got 32 Republicans. That gives those 17 Democrats a whole lot of power. Because with 17 votes, you can stop anything you want to stop. Because that's all it takes, 17. Because there aren't enough left over to get you to 49. When there's only 32 left over, 32 is not 33, you fall short. And that happens over and over and over again. Does it matter? It matters a whole lot. And it matters most right here in Omaha, Nebraska. Because we have this problem with the way that we apportion our electoral votes. In every other state, except for Maine and Nebraska, whichever presidential candidate gets the most votes in that state's election, the president, all of those electoral votes from that state go to him or her. In Nebraska, we don't do it that way. We do it by congressional district. There was a mistake that was made long, long ago, before any of us can even remember probably, but it needs to be fixed. Well, if the Democrats control 17 votes, how are you going to pass a bill to fix the Electoral College problem? And it's a big problem because it brings the National Democratic Party pumps millions of dollars into Omaha so they can win that one electoral vote, because you just never know when a presidential election could be decided by one electoral vote. There are all kinds of formulas that people were looking at the last time around about electoral votes and so forth, and under some of the theories, it could have come down to one vote. We've got to get that fixed. Well, how do we do that? I've read Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. I've read the Old Testament. There's nothing in sacred scripture that says that the state of Nebraska must live under this rule of 33. It's in the rule book, the rule of 33. But who votes for that? The senators. 25 votes, and you can change the rule book. And I talked to senators about this. Why do you put up with this? Why don't you change the rules? And you wouldn't believe this. You know what they say? They say, oh my gosh, if we change that rule, the Democrats get really, really mad. Oh, really? Well, I'm getting really, really mad.
Yeah. Right.
And we need to get really, really mad about this.
Right.
And insist that these rules get changed. Get rid of the secret voting. Get rid of the rule of 33. Make it more reasonable. 30. It only takes 30 votes to overturn a governor's veto. Yet to pass a bill, it takes 33 votes if the bill's controversial. And a lot of bills are. Most times, the rule of 33 works against us. Admittedly, we use it against the other side too. They've got their LGBT gender ideology agendas and so forth. They got all that stuff. We use our rule of 33 against that stuff. But we can probably beat them anyway on those issues. But they use it against us on pro-life, on tax policy, on spending issues and so forth, on and on and on down the list. Usually the rule of 33 works against the Republicans. Yet the Republicans will not change that rule. Why? Democrats get really mad. So what? They'll get over it. You know, they'll get over it. So it's just under my skin because as a presiding officer, I watch this stuff. It's just, and then I talk to the senators, and I just don't get it. Part of what's going on there, it's called Club Unicam. Club Unicam. Unfortunately, some people, not Jim, not myself, I can tell you that, we're fighters. Some people want to get in the legislature to join Club Unicam. They get treated better than they've ever been treated in their lives. They get taken out to lunch all the time. Everybody treats them like they're high and mighty people. And it kind of goes to their head because they're part of this unique club of 49. And they're really not there to do the people's business. And they're not there to deliver on the promises that they made to their constituents when they ran for that office. So it's really kind of a tragic situation. But it is what it is. The state right now, let me shift gears a little bit, talk about money. I've never seen anything like this. I'm sure Jim has never seen anything like this either. The state is swimming in money right now. And it's an artificial economy because there's so much federal money that's been dumped on not just our state, but all the states. The infrastructure bill, the coronavirus number 1, coronavirus number 2, the stimulus payments, all these sources of money that have been pumped into all of our states artificially. And it's had an effect on our economy. And right now, the state coffers have never looked better. We've got what we call the rainy day fund, and that fund you got to keep in your side pocket for when the economy takes a dip. That rainy day fund is way, way over $1 billion. Way over that. We got to fix that by giving the money back to the people who paid it in. It's their money, not ours. And if we're collecting more than we need to properly fund state government operations, we need to give it back. So, and we were going to try it now. And we've done some of that this past few years. We've reduced the taxation on Social Security. We're going to phase out. We're one of the few states that still tax Social Security benefits, which is crazy. We're driving our seniors out of our state. We don't want to do that. So we're phasing out. Over 5 years, tax Social Security is going to go away. I think we're in year 2 of that now. We can probably speed that up. Property tax relief. Wherever I go as an elected official, and I travel across the state constantly, I love doing it. Wherever I go, people come up and say, "You got to fix the property tax. It's too burdensome." And if you try to walk them through this and say, "Look, the state of Nebraska does not levy a property tax. The state of Nebraska does not get a dime in property tax revenue. It's local government. Look at your tax statement. 2/3 of your tax bill, your property tax bill, is your public school system." And I get it. We need a good public school system, and we do have one. But all of that property tax revenue goes to local government, schools, cities, towns, villages, community colleges, NRDs. They have levying authority. The state does not have levying authority. And they say, "That's great, Foley. Now fix it." We don't get the money. Fix it. Okay. We've been working on it. Now, the one tool in our toolbox we have is the property tax credit program. You can get a credit against the taxes that you pay in property taxes. So it helps somewhat. It's a step forward. We didn't get into this mess overnight. We're not going to get out of it overnight. But it's one thing that we've done. It's good. But we need to put more and more money into that property tax credit program. And we've got to fix this crazy school aid formula. And I applaud Governor-elect Jim Pilling. You probably saw last week, he's created a new task force to study the school aid formula. There's probably only about 3 people in the state, and I'm not one of them, who understands the school aid formula. It's so darn complex. Invented decades ago, and every 2 years the legislature comes in and tweak it a little bit here, tweak it a little bit there. It's crazy expensive, complicated. And the bottom line, though, is that most of our school districts don't get any money, what's called equalization money, out of the school aid formula. Most of that money is going to Lincoln, Omaha, Sarpy, the eastern schools. The central Nebraska, the western school districts, by and large, don't get any money out of that formula. So they're screaming bloody murder, because when you don't get money out of the school aid formula, you got to put that burden on the property tax. So when you get west of Lincoln, that's what you're going to hear: property tax, property tax, property tax. They want it fixed. So Jim Pillins, from that, he's not from Lincoln, Omaha, so he's sensitive to that because of his ag background and so forth. So he is determined to try to fix that school aid formula. But the difficulty is, as soon as you touch that formula, everybody gets the printout. How it's going to affect each one of the 250 or so public school districts. And they say, "Oh, it hurts my district. I can't vote for that." And again, you look at that picture map, political powers in the East, and those senators are not going to vote for a school aid formula change that damages their public schools. They will not do that. So the only way to fix it was put more state dollars into the formula so that we can make these other school districts whole. Now, whether or not Jim can find the money to do that and fix that, God bless him for trying. He's got this task force pulled together. All the key players will be at the table. They'll be haggling over this thing for a number of months and come back with a recommendation. But that's a big ticket issue, and I applaud the governor-elect for taking that on. It's a tough one. Pro-life. It's a core issue for me. Absolute core issue for me. That's what drew me into politics in the first place. If we don't get this issue right, nothing else is going to matter. If we aren't big enough as a people to protect unborn children, we're going to lose our country, we're going to lose our souls. We've got to address that issue. And now, the Supreme Court has taken this impediment out of our way. They struck down Roe v. Wade. So it's wide open. We have an opportunity to protect unborn lives. I don't know how strong of a bill we can put together. But again, you're starting with only 32 votes on the Republican side, presuming they're all pro-life, and I don't know that they are. You got Mike McDonald, the one pro-life Democrat that I know of. So I don't know how you get to 33. It's going to be pretty tough to do on a really strong pro-life bill, because a lot of those 32, they may tell you that they're pro-life, but on a really, really strong bill, I'm not sure they're going to be there. So we'll see where this goes, but this is a core issue for me. This is my heart bleeds for this issue. It matters that much to me. Let me move on a little bit to the state auditor function. As you know, I had that job for 8 years. Loved it. And when I was finished with there's no term limits on state auditor. I finished up my second term as state auditor, and it was when Governor Heinemann was leaving office. It was an open seat in the governor's office. I ran for governor. It's a 6-way Republican primary, and I didn't win. So I figured, well, I gave it my best. 6 years in the legislature, 8 years state auditor, ran for governor, didn't win. Okay, life moves on. And then lo and behold, I ended up getting what you might call the consolation prize, the lieutenant governor's position, which has been a great job. I've enjoyed working with Governor Ricketts, been very good. So now here I am going back again to state auditor. And it's a very, very important job. I call myself the state auditor-elect. Truthfully, the job is not state auditor. The position is an auditor of public accounts. Because we don't just audit state government. Most of what we do is state government. But that's not all. The jurisdiction of the auditor's office is bigger than that. As state auditor, I can audit Omaha Public Schools. I can audit the city of Omaha. I can audit an NRD, community college. And we've done all of those over the years. We've audited all kinds of things. And we can, and we're going to continue to do that. Typically, local units of government, which could be audited by me, typically they're audited by a CPA firm. The CPA firm then submits that audit report to my office, and we review it. And if there's problems, we can go in behind them and do another audit. Or the phone rings to the auditor's office every day with somebody who says, I work in the local government, blah, 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 such and so agency. You wouldn't believe what my boss is doing. And 9 times out of 10, they're just trying to get their boss in trouble. Because what they're bringing to us is they just don't understand how it all works, and they don't know accountants. It looks funny, but it's really the correct way of doing it. But 1 time out of 10, they're right. They did find something. So that's part of our job, is to kind of sort through all of this and figure out, is this a wild goose chase? Is somebody just kind of an axe to grind? Or is there really something here that needs to be looked at? One of those calls we got one time was on Wyuka Cemetery in Lincoln, Nebraska. Wyuka Cemetery is actually a publicly owned cemetery, so it's subject to audit by my office. And a guy came in, and he sat down, and he started talking about Wyuka Cemetery, and he used to work there. He'd been fired. So right off the bat, he's a disgruntled, you figure, what is it? He's a disgruntled employee. He's just mad. So he's telling his story, and he's like, I don't know if this is going to be worth my time or not, and trying to piece it together. And he says, there's one guy down there who's really honest. His name is Todd. He's the chief accountant to Wyuka. Bunch of crooks down there, but Todd's the honest guy. If you just go and meet with Todd, he'll set you straight. So we did. We met with Todd. Turns out, long story short, Todd was the guy who was stealing the money. And it took us a long time to figure this out. We launched this audit. We weren't finding any problems. It's like, what are we doing here, you know? And then all of a sudden, we asked Todd for a set of bank statements for his checking account at the cemetery. And he gave us a set of bank statements. Looked like perfectly legitimate bank statements. It's amazing what you can create these days with the right software and the right printers and so forth. He provided us with a set of bank statements. Beautiful. One of my auditors started adding up all the checks that were issued that month. And lo and behold, the total didn't match the total in the books. Something's wrong here. We went over to the bank, said, I need a set of bank statements for this 1 month. We took the real bank statements from the bank and the ones that Todd gave us, and the numbers were different. He had created bank statements. That's how clever he was. So as the auditor, well, I was looking for this among the auditors, because people give you a statement, you ask them for a record or document, they'll give it to you. Right. It's not the real thing. They're just something they created. You can create an invoice. You can create a bank statement. You can create a contract. You can create all kinds of stuff. When the auditor asks for it, they'll give it to you. But it's not the real thing. One time I asked the university to give me some records, and they made me wait and wait and wait and wait and wait. And there was one key number I was looking for. It was in the bottom of this contract. They gave me every page of what I asked for, except the last page. Crazy. That's the kind of games people play. It just drives you nuts. It's funny how people treat somebody else's money and play games with it. But anyway, that's what we deal with all the time. Anyway, we did this audit of Hawaii Cemetery. We found out what was going on. We figured it out. And Todd went off to prison for a couple of years. And we actually did a background check on Todd after we realized what was going on. He had been convicted twice prior of financial embezzlement. And the cemetery hired him as their chief accountant without doing a background check. Put him in charge of all the money.
That's what they get.
Yeah, that's what they get. Right?
That's what they get.
So, anyway, you can't invent this stuff. But we're always looking for things like that. We're looking for people in government who are using their position for personal financial gain. Let me give you an example of that. When I was the auditor, some government agencies advertise through the Husker Sports Network. They might have to advertise a cancer screening program in HHS, or the Click It or Ticket program through the Department of Motor Vehicles. They might advertise on the Husker Sports Network during football games. Okay, that's fair game. A state agency can buy advertising to advertise their program if there's a public need to do so. But when they're getting lots and lots of football tickets in return for placing those ads, no. And we found dozens and dozens of state employees who are buying advertising and getting football tickets for their personal use. And we blew them in. We found instances where people were getting contracts issued by their government agency where they were a part owner in the business that was going to be recipient of the contract money, things like that. And under the old law, which has changed now since we did our audit, but under the old law, if a person becomes elderly and they can't properly manage their finances, they can go into court and ask for a public guardian to take control of their personal financial business and so forth. And a lot of people get that. They're elderly, their family's all gone, there's nobody to take care of them, so they go to court and say, I need a public guardian. Well, there was a woman out in Scotts Bluff who would go into court all over the state, and she would volunteer to be a public guardian. She did this 600 times. She was the guardian for 600 all across the state. She had control of all their money, and she was stealing the money. Surprise! And we caught her. And one of our auditors confronted her with the information. She goes, "You know what I've been doing. You know what I've been doing. You caught me. Where do I go?" Well, we brought in the state patrol, and they took care of the situation. But I mean, the law now, because of that audit, the legislature completely revamped this whole guardianship thing. So you can't just show up in court and say, "I volunteer to be a guardian." No, you can't do that. So But unfortunately, sadly, under the old days, that would have worked. Under the old ethic that people operated on, that would have worked. But that's not where we are today, tragically. And now we got more government to oversee all this guardianship. There's a whole office now that oversees all this stuff. So it's more government, unfortunately. We audited a group called the Autism Center. The people, great work, working with autistic kids. Wonderful, beautiful work. Got to be done. But the people who were running this autism center had a home they were going to use as a group home for autistic young adults. And they were charging the government rent of their home. The home was empty. There was not one autistic, there was nobody in there. It was just flat empty. And while it was empty, they spent thousands of dollars of public funds to put a new heating and ventilation, air conditioning system in the house, put a brand new deck on the house, all charged to us as taxpayers. We caught them on that. We had a big deal about that. Clean that up. There's a program called LIHEAP, Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program. It's federally funded. The feds give us the money. We divvy it out to utility companies to cover the back due bills of low-income people that can't keep up with their energy bills. The people, and this is all administered by our Department of Health and Human Services. Well, they had extra money one year, lots of extra money for this LIHEAP program, federal dollars. And they said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to take all the people that are low income, that are qualified for the low income home energy program, and we're going to send all of them a check for $500. And they can use that to pay their utility bills. Hundreds and hundreds of checks went out. Do you think they use it to pay their utility bills? No. Why would you do that? The checks were being cashed at Walmart, grocery stores, liquor stores, you name it. They're being cashed all over the state. People got a $500 check that they were not anticipating with a message saying, use this for your back due utility bills. If you're low income, that's not the first place you're going to spend $500. Right. It's just not. So, anyway, we found that. What about the state's financial records? The past 2 years, well, every year, for that matter, every year the state must produce a comprehensive financial statement for the state of Nebraska. For the past 2 years, it's been so screwed up that the auditors kind of threw up their hands and said, we cannot offer an opinion on those financial statements because they're so messed up. Governor Ricketts is on that, it's getting fixed, but it should not have gotten that far out of whack. We're working at it. The State Historical Society, they had a private fund. It's a state agency, it's a private fund, and the director of the State Historical Society was the only one who had check signing authority on that private fund, controlled by the State Historical Society, and he's writing checks to cover all of his personal expenses. Like bought a new truck, other improvements to his home and so forth. We caught him. There was a place out in Kearney, Nebraska called the I Believe in Me Ranch. You gotta understand, most of the money at HHS, which is our largest agency, most of that money goes out the door to providers of services. There's this group called the I Believe in Me Ranch. Their service to the state was to take about 25, I'll call them juvenile delinquents, that's probably not a good politically correct term, but talking about boys, kind of teenage boys who are always in trouble, send them out to this ranch in rural Nebraska. They'll work on the ranch, they'll go to a one-room schoolhouse, they'll get 3 square meals a day, they'll have discipline in their lives. Okay, it's a good model. The folks who ran the I Believe in Me Ranch, first of all, the director was paying herself $90,000 a year, which is a pretty high salary for central Nebraska. And the ranch consisted of 3 buildings, 2 little houses that she owned, and this other little building that served as the schoolhouse. She owned all these 3 buildings. She was, now in rural Nebraska, fair market rent on some older buildings like that would not be very much. She was charging the state of Nebraska $15,000 a month to rent her buildings. Over the course of a number of years, she got $1.3 million in rental income in the state, plus her $90,000 salary, to take care of a dozen or so juvenile delinquents. That's the kind of crazy stuff that goes on that we find that the state auditor finds. So I'm going right back at it and trying to find some more. Is it all cleaned up now? No, it's not. I wish I could tell you that it was. Wish I could tell you that we got it all. We didn't. Because there's always more. But that's what I'm walking into starting January 6th, 5th rather. The legislature gets sworn in on the 4th, Wednesday the 4th. The new constitutional officers get sworn in the following day. So on that first day, when the legislature is in session, I will actually be presiding over the legislature, just for that one last day. And the following day, I'll be marching down the aisle and I'll get sworn in to be the next state auditor, which is my old gig. Now, a lot of people, there's about 40 people that work in that office, really talented people. A lot of turnover because the young accountants, we hire the best we can find out of the schools, university and so forth. Really bright young kids, men and women. Women are really good at auditors, by the way. And they'll work for about 2 or 3 years in the auditor's office. They'll get their CPA license. Boom, they're gone. They're gone. They're going to private industry. They can make a lot more money than I can pay them. But some of them stay. Some of them stay. And so about the 40 people that I'll inherit as a staff, about half of them were there before when I worked there. And they just kind of like government auditing. It's a good fit for them. It's a kind of a standard 40-hour work week. If you go off to a private CPA firm, you might be working longer hours and tax season and all that kind of stuff. They don't want that because they're family people, got kids at home, whatever. So anyway, there's really talented people that I'm looking forward to reconnecting with those staff and picking up right where I left off with this kind of stuff. And somebody's got to be the bad cop. Somebody's got to dig it up. And I kind of enjoy the challenge of finding this stuff and talking about it. So anyway, let me stop there and just see if you have questions about the auditors.
12:50 if you want to take questions for 2
Yeah,
minutes.
if we got time, yeah, that'd be great. Yes, sir, Dan.
There's the formulas for school aid. I think West Side is sued because they got underpaid.
Right.
My question is, and if somebody got underpaid, they've got the right to go after and get pushed. But those that are overpaid, I have not heard any conversation about getting that money recovered. Is there anything in the...
Yeah, well, I don't know the answer to your specific question about the schools that were overpaid. I don't know the answer to that. But somehow... Oh, sorry. Yeah, his question was that West Side School discovered that their school district was underpaid pursuant to the formula. They proved it, apparently. Some of the other districts were overpaid because if somebody gets underpaid, some must have gotten overpaid. What about those schools that got overpaid? They got too much money out of the formula. What about them? Do they have to send it back? Great question. I don't know.
It wasn't school aid. It was the taxes or the
OPPD
payments in lieu
money.
of taxes
Yeah.
that came out of either MUD or OPPD.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. It wasn't school aid fund. But the principle's the same. Yeah. Somebody got underpaid, somebody got overpaid. It should be trued up.
Yep.
It certainly should be. I don't know what happened in that case. Something I ought to look into. But the school aid formula, talk about the school aid formula. One of the provisions of the school aid formula is that the more low-income kids you have in your school, the more money you get. Well, the school superintendents have figured this out. So they walk around their school district and they pass out forms for the school lunch program. And the more kids you can get enrolled in the school lunch program, the more money you get for your school. A lot of those kids, we did an audit of this when I was the auditor. A lot of those kids were not qualified to be in the school lunch program. But the school superintendent was passing out the forms, fill it out, nobody's going to check. Well, we checked. So, anyway, another war story. Way back.
I'm going to stand up so everyone can hear me. I've listened used to state officials, heard from governors in the past and so forth. We don't collect property tax, but you guys do create the laws for all the entities under the government.
Very good.
Douglas County only has property tax. Technically, they could do a sales tax, but they can't tax Omaha. So 80% of the county is exempt, but not with property tax. So guess what? The county's going to have to raise property taxes if they want to pay for some of the stuff that happens. This is true of many of the tax entities, and I don't have time to go to 12 to 15 different government entities to tell them, lower my property taxes. When is the state going to reformat what it does in the tax laws, the schools, the counties, and the cities.
Well, you're very right. The state does not collect the property tax, but the legislature does write the laws that impact this. One of the laws that they tried to change, and again, we bump up against this Rule 33, they try to put a cap that your property taxes cannot go up by more than 3% in any given year. We couldn't get that done because counties have lobbyists, the cities have lobbyists, school districts have lobbyists, and they work those senators over, and they say, you're not voting for that. We can't live on a 3% increase. We've got it more than that. We might need more than that. So they fight against those kinds of things. But you're absolutely correct. Your principle is absolutely correct. You know, as state officials, we say, hey, it's not us. We didn't do it. We didn't raise your property taxes. But we do write the laws. So you're right on that point. Over here.
You mentioned the rules, unicameral rules is in conflict with our Constitution.
Yes.
Who would have standing to bring that to court?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not an attorney,
Yeah.
but I'll tell you what, it's another war story. A few years ago, Senator John Keane of the Hastings area, he made a motion. I was sitting in the chair, presiding over. He made a motion, said, Mr. Chairman, I ask for a roll call vote on this committee chairmanship. I ruled, okay, we'll proceed with that. So there's a big debate. Of course, everybody went crazy. Yeah. What do you mean? I said, what do you mean a public vote? We can't do that. We've never done it before. So they debated that, whether or not they would allow him to have a public vote, and they voted him down. I affirm that he could offer that motion. They voted him down. So he, therefore, is an aggrieved party. He asked for a public vote. The Constitution says he can be entitled to a public vote. The legislature said, no, we're not going to give you a public vote. He was an aggrieved party. He could have filed a lawsuit. He chose not to do that. I think if he were here, I think he would say, I prefer that the legislature simply change their rules to conform with the Constitution, rather than taking this to court and running the risk that some court somewhere might say, well, it says all votes have to be public votes, but they're really we're talking about bills. It doesn't say bills, it says all votes. So you never know what a court will do. But there's your answer. He was an aggrieved party who could have taken that to court.
Is he still in the unicameral?
No, he's not.
I guess it'd have to be Tom Brewer. He's about the only.
Well,
one that
yeah,
gets to
that's
do it.
Tom is pretty. Yeah, he's a pretty bold guy. He doesn't. He's not afraid of anything. He's not afraid of a court. Not afraid of me. Not. But he could do it. Well, great. Oh, sorry, Jim.
Well, that whole school formula, and of course it's been debated for years when I was down there, when you were down there, but it really has to be changed. You're in the West Side School District right now. You're right now sitting in the district that I represented for 12 years. This last election was just really, District 20 had a fabulous candidate in Stu Dornan, and he lost by just a few votes. This district, there's enough Republicans that could have changed that, but it didn't happen. West Side School District, we used to call it, all 5 of my kids went there, Hollywood High. But did you know that right now today, that 30% of the students at West Side are in the SNAP program? That is subsistence to kids in a poverty area. And of course, West Side, when my oldest son went there, was a district of about 10,000 students, and it's gradually gone down, but they have option students that have come in. But all I'm saying is that whole school formula must be changed. I hope that our new governor can do that. And then getting back to, when you're elected to the legislature, Nebraska, and there is no majority whip, there's no minority whip. So when you're elected, you are really on your own. You're responsible to your voters, your citizens in your district, but that's all, which is okay. But you know that every week, the Democrats caucus, every week, if the Republicans would say we're going to caucus, oh, every newspaper in the state would rise up and say, oh, this is a unicameral. You can't do that. The Democrats, you know that.
Just to follow up on your point about Stu Dorton, that was a sad day to see him lose by what? What was it, 100 votes? Or,
Yeah.
Yeah, about 100 votes. And my neck of the woods, Lincoln, Russ Barger lost by 250 votes, roughly. He's demanding a recount. And I don't know where that will go. I have no idea. But I think, election commissioner, total statewide turnout, 55%? Yeah. About 55%. 45% of the people, half the people said, I can't be bothered. We got to change that. And the Democrats, we talked about early voting, those are Democrat votes. Those are Democrat votes. We got to change that.
Do one or two more.
Yep.
No.
You know what?
Plain voting in general.
One last question. There's a lot of problems with drop boxes, ballot harvesting, mail-in ballot, registering periods, and qualifications that have to be on. They're all need to be performed. But I don't see any serious effort going in that way. We got voter ID, but that's not going to do as much as what is needed.
Yeah.
Just so you know, when you add mail-in ballots, ballot harvesting, and so forth on there, it's going to favor the incumbents because people are forced into saying, well, you got to vote. And what they do is they vote for the names they recognize. So it always favors the incumbents.
Yeah. Good points. You mentioned the voter ID. Perfect example. We couldn't get that bill through the legislature. Tried. Always bumped up against Rule 33. Couldn't get it done. Then they gather signatures, put it on the ballot, and it wins by what? 2/3?
Yeah.
Something's wrong.
Even one in Douglas County.
Even one in Douglas County. Yeah. People wanted voter ID. They understood the importance of that. Yeah, we couldn't get it done in unicameral because of this artificial barrier of 33.
Okay, last question.
Yes.
You said Nebraska is a red state, and I don't really believe it, because Democrats control city councils, county commissioners, school boards, learning community. You look at all these things, and 17 votes in the legislature. As far as voter ID goes, what will the legislature do to make sure that some of the things that were brought up, harvesting, early voting, for any reason, ballot box stuffing, so that the 17 don't control how those rules are written?
Well, I wish I could promise you that those 17 Democrats aren't going to block those kind of bills that we want to see passed. But that's all it takes. It takes 17 votes to vote in a block, and you can stop anything. Because you take 49, subtract 17, there aren't enough votes to get you to 33. You're always going to be at 32, not 33. And your motion of cloture will fail. Seen it over and over and over again. Thank you all so much. God bless you.
And Mike, thank you.